All right, well, thank you for joining us today. My name is Carol Shires with School Choice Wisconsin, and we're excited to bring you another seminar in our quality series. Our goal is to provide helpful resources to schools on a wide variety of topics that affect your operations. Today, we're pleased to join forces once again with our friends at the Wisconsin Institute for Law and Liberty as we review what state law requires for private schools regarding health and safety. And with a new school year upon us, this is the perfect time for some reminders. Our School Choice Wisconsin president, Nick Kelly, and Will attorney, Cory Brewer, are today's presenters. So with no further ado, Cory, you can take it away.
All right, thank you, Carol. Is everyone able to see that okay? All
Yes.
right, so as Carol mentioned, my name is Cory Brewer. I'm one of our attorneys here at Will, and my focus is really dedicated to K through 12 education. And the reason why we wanted to offer this presentation in conjunction with School Choice Wisconsin is because we kind of realized, and I think a lot of you raised this issue, that there's no really one-stop shop for health and safety requirements. There's not an easy way to navigate these requirements or find them all in one place. And, to the extent possible, we wanted to help provide that roadmap and give an overview of things to be considered and put things on your radar that hopefully maybe are new to you, and just let you know what these requirements are. And as you all likely know, for schools in a choice program, there's a requirement that the private school meets all health and safety laws that apply to public schools. That's really all that's included in the choice statute. So what exactly does that mean? Because even when you go then to look at what's required of the public schools, it's in various areas of our state statutes. There are local ordinances that apply, federal laws that apply, and it's not exactly clear what that means. And to that point, we just wanted to note that this will not be a comprehensive list of requirements. There's a lot of details here. Certain areas could certainly have their own presentation almost, but we wanted to put these on your radar, give an overview, and just make you aware that you should also be following any local ordinances and then just keep up with legal counsel for any updates to these requirements. And with that, we will kind of get started with some of the substantive topics. The first one being fire code. So Wisconsin adopted the fire code of the 2012 edition of the National Fire Association that was effective in 2014. You can access this online. Municipalities can adopt a different fire code or additional requirements if equivalent. There are a few exceptions for rural school buildings if all of the following are satisfied. The building consists of a single classroom. Building is used for a school operated by a bona fide religious denomination, and the teachings of that religious denomination prohibit the use of certain products, devices, or designs necessary to comply with a standard or code. In addition to that, the NFPA code requirements include inspection, testing, maintenance of all fire safety features, and fire protection systems, including a smoke detector and alarms. Now, really importantly, before I go on to the next consideration here, I wanted to let you all know that almost every one of these requirements are for private schools. So they're not necessarily specific to the choice program. If you look at our state statutes, almost all of these apply to private schools. So these are things that you would be subject to, whether or not you're a member of the choice program. And to the extent there are any additional requirements specific to the choice program, we'll try to point those out as which ones are different. But really, these generally apply to private schools in Wisconsin. Now, facilities, this is just something to be aware of. There's not really any rules that establish requirements related to classroom size, square footage. Facilities are subject to local, state, and federal building codes and fire codes. This is probably something that's more applicable to those maybe starting a new school or opening a new school, but our state law doesn't have a lot of stringent requirements in that topic. Now, here's another one that's kind of a general phrase: safe and healthful facilities. Schools must provide safe and healthful facilities. Well, what exactly does that mean? You'll see here that I've cited Wisconsin Statute 121.02. That is a statute that applies to public schools. So here would be an example of something that isn't applicable to every single private school, but because it's a health and safety law applicable to public schools, that one provision in the choice statutes, I think, triggers this then as a law for private schools in the choice program, this safe and healthful facilities requirement. And there's really a lot of details if you go to that statute. Really what this focuses on is compliance with the management and removal of toxic substances like lead-bearing paints, asbestos. There are statutes pertaining to reporting of lead exposure and poisoning, following laws on certification and training of lead poisoning. And at the bottom of the screen here in that chapter 254 of the Wisconsin statutes, that's where you would find more details for what that actually means. And just one more piece on that safe and healthful facilities. It's probably a good area to just really monitor and have someone assigned to monitor those requirements. Next one, prohibition on free-flowing mercury. So schools are not permitted to knowingly purchase or use free-flowing elemental mercury in any device or on its own. There's a few exceptions here that are included in the statute. So if there's no reasonably acceptable mercury-free alternative that exists, if there's for some reason a purchase required under federal law, or the only mercury added component in the device is a button cell battery. Those would be exceptions to purchasing or using that mercury. Next is indoor environmental quality plans. So this one, again, applies to all private schools, whether or not you participate in a parental choice program. And it involves developing and implementing a plan for maintaining environmental quality. And again, this is not really clear in the statute itself, but DPI has a model management plan here. What this is really intended to get at is addressing topics like having animals in the classroom, what food is going to be in the classroom, what art projects, painting, hazardous materials, and just things related to environmental quality in that regard. Again, this is something that someone in your school might want to monitor. Next, suicide prevention resources. So annually, each private school is required to inform their staff of the resources available regarding suicide prevention. DPI by law is required to provide a model notice for youth suicide prevention, and that is to include how staff can access those suicide prevention resources. And DPI does have that model notice available on its website. This one's rather straightforward. Every private school has to provide a standard first aid kit for use in the case of an emergency. This one is related to one of the questions, actually, I think maybe more than one question that individuals submitted as they were registering about immunizations. And full disclosure, this is not my area of expertise. There's a lot here, but we wanted to provide, again, just a general overview. So students, now this is not necessarily a school obligation, but on the student and parent side, they're required to present written evidence of what immunizations they've had and that they're basically on track. That immunization requirement can be waived if a parent submits a written statement to the school objecting to the immunization for reasons of health, religion, or personal conviction. Now, those three kind of categories of waiver are in our state law. Different states have different kind of thresholds or requirements for when you can get a waiver for immunizations. Those are the acceptable ones in Wisconsin law. And another thing here we wanted to bring to your attention is that when the school notifies a parent of those immunization requirements, it should also provide written information about a right to a waiver. And that can be something as simple as what's in our state statutes as cited here. The other thing here I wanted to bring to your attention was that schools are required to notify the DA, the district attorney of the county where the pupil resides, if the minor student doesn't provide either the immunization records or a waiver. So really, that just gives families an incentive to submit either proof of immunization or a waiver.
Cory, I want to step in there for a moment just to note for schools in case they missed it. DPI's nurse for schools put out some information. I think it was on August 15th about immunization. So if you're looking for some up-to-date resources on that, DHS, the Department of Health Services, has a new and improved booklet that's available for schools if you're looking for guidance on how to report those immunizations.
Thank you, Carol. The next topic would be evacuation drills. So there are a few different types of evacuation drills and different times that they're required to take place. Again, there's a few exceptions in our state law, but in general, fire drills monthly, drills related to evacuating to a safe location in case of a tornado or other hazard at least twice annually, and drills according to a school safety plan, which Nick is going to talk more in detail about, again, at least twice annually. And in terms of maintaining records of these drills, all three categories here, the schools should keep a record of when they occur and what is occurring for 7 years. Now, I know too, just real briefly, we had a few questions about school safety plan grants. And here, I think the most important thing that I want to make you aware of is just to monitor the DOJ website regularly for opportunities, deadlines to apply. The last I checked, I don't think it's been updated, but that would be one to maybe designate a staff member just to monitor that website. And I know School Choice Wisconsin is following that as well.
Cory, there's a question that came in about the drills. It says, I thought it was a drill monthly, not necessarily a fire drill every month.
Now, let's see here.
Or back one slide, I think.
Going forward here. I believe, and I would go to this first, this 118.072A1. I believe it says fire drills. I will confirm for you, and anyone else can look at that as well, but that would be the precisely where to look for what exactly that monthly drill has to be, would be in that 118.072. Now, this is related, but as you all probably know, it's a lot more detailed, the school safety plan. This is, I'll give just a basic overview. Nick will get into the details, but some of the things that are included in the state statutes are, before you create or update a plan, you should conduct a safety assessment in consultation with local law enforcement. A copy of the plan is required to be filed with the Office of School Safety before January 1st of each year. And again, if you go to this 118.07 subsection 4, it includes a pretty detailed itemized list of what other information or certification should be submitted with a copy of that plan. The governing board of any private school has to review and approve this school safety plan at least once every 3 years. And for a drill in the proper response to a school violence event, the school is to submit to the governing board of the school just a written evaluation of the drill within 30 days of holding that type of a drill. Now, this is also included in our state law. So the governing board may not assist a school employee, contractor, or agent to obtain a new job in a school or with a local educational agency if they know or have a reasonable suspicion to believe that that individual committed a sex offense and the victim was a minor or a student. There are a few exceptions here as well. So if that assistance is just the transmittal of administrative or personnel files, that's not prohibited. If the information that the private school knows or that form the basis of their suspicion has been properly reported to law enforcement and any case or investigation has been closed without a conviction, again, that's an exception. In that instance, this prohibition would not be triggered. So moving on to mandatory trainings, and I am going to pause here to let Carol step in and add a little bit about this training on reporting of child abuse and neglect.
Yeah, so thanks, Cory. SCW is monitoring this and has raised this as a concern. I believe the first notice that schools in the choice program received was back in late January, early February. DPI sent out a notice reminding schools about mandatory trainings. It was a little bit confusing because they linked to the page that had all the mandatory trainings for public schools, which not all of those are necessarily required by private schools. In the meantime, we brought that up as a question and wanted a little clarification on this. DPI has been updating some of their trainings, and they just here last week, I believe it was, or the week before, put out a notice about the mandatory trainings, specifically this one on reporting of child abuse and neglect. DPI has updated their information, but they have stated that the training needs to be their training, not from some other source. I believe some of the dioceses have their own trainings and whatnot. So we are following up on that, and there'll be more to come in terms of clarity on that. From what we can tell right now, you do have to be a reporter and you do need to be trained. But the point in question is whether or not you have to use the DPI training. And at the moment, what we are getting from Ledge Council is that that's not true. You don't. But we'll bring clarification to that in the days ahead here and send it out to everyone.
Yeah, so just to expand on that briefly, obviously private school employees are mandated reporters. And if you look at this section, it's cited below here, 118.07, subsection 5 is where this training is required, and it doesn't say private school or charter school. The other parts of that same statute do. So there's a statutory kind of canon of construction where if it's included everywhere else but left out in one section, then the court, if this were ever to go to a court, generally interprets that to mean that the legislature did that on purpose, right? They included it elsewhere but not here. And I think that would provide a reasonable grounds for pushing back that this mandatory training is not required to be the DPI approved training. And this training on threats of school violence, again, it's in that same subsection, 118.07 subsection 5. Schools are required to provide all employees training in the laws governing the reporting of a threat of violence. Again, we couldn't find any statutory basis that would require this to be DPI approved. Schools should provide the training, but again, this part of the statute did not include private and charter schools in terms of DPI approved training on this topic. Another required training is related to bloodborne pathogens. So this one's a little bit more specific to federal law, OSHA. And essentially these OSHA regulations require all employees, including those at private schools, who may be exposed to bloodborne pathogens to receive training. And it includes the phrase occupational exposure. What that means is that it is a reasonably anticipated skin, eye, mucous membrane, or other contact with blood or other potentially infectious materials that may result from the performance of the employee's duties. That is part of federal law. So if you're an employer and you have employees that are likely to have this occupational exposure, then there should be kind of a written exposure control plan designed to eliminate or minimize employee exposure to bloodborne pathogens. And this would be one where DPI does provide a training module, and this federal law, so this 29 Code of Federal Regulations, includes additional details on that topic. The next mandatory training is related to medication administration. So private schools are to have policies and implement training on medication administration. Boards of schools whose employees or volunteers may be authorized to administer medication to students should also have a policy, a written policy on this topic. And this is another one where we didn't find any indication that the training would need to be DPI training or DPI approved when it involves a private school. Mandatory training on life-saving skills instruction. So schools should provide instruction on AED and CPR in any health course offered to students in grades 7 to 12. Just a few notes here. Schools don't have to create a health course for this. They can just use any existing health course and add these topics if they're not already included. Multiple years of instruction are not required. Students may practice CPR with reasonable substitutes. They don't need to actually practice AED. They just need to be trained on instruction about AED. Student records and confidentiality. So there's a statute here, this 118.125 cited below, that applies primarily to public schools. So I just wanted to flag that for you. But private schools still are subject to state and federal laws on confidentiality in student records. So they should just ensure that staff are trained on if there's personally identifiable student information, when that is protected under state or federal law. An example of that would be anything health related. If it identifies the student, that could conflict with HIPAA and our Wisconsin statute. That's kind of the state version of HIPAA. And here, this seclusion and physical restraint, this is one that I wanted to point out as being specific to a choice program. It only applies in certain instances, and one of those would be if your school has chosen to participate in the special needs scholarship program. So private schools that do participate in the SNSP must provide training on seclusion and physical restraint. And in general, individuals are prohibited from using physical restraint on a student if untrained, unless, again, there's exceptions here, unless in the case of an emergency. And briefly here, before I turn it over to Nick, again, training on a safety plan. Private schools have to have this safety plan in effect. The governing body of a private school shall determine who's required to receive the training and the frequency of the training, and it should be based upon the prioritized needs and risks of the school. So without going into too much more detail there, I will turn it over to Nick here to kind of provide tips on implementing those school safety plans.
Sure. Good morning, everybody. Just say good afternoon as well. Thanks for being with us here today. In the rush of getting everything ready for the start of the school year, I know from my past experiences, a lot of times some of these details get overlooked, and you find yourself scrambling at some points to catch up with some of these different regulations. So this is very appropriate to be looking at this point in time. And when it comes to safety plans, these safety plans can be very unique. I'll give you an example from where I was. We were in line with a runway for General Mitchell Airport. So we actually had to have a safety plan that included a runway crash site. So if a plane were to have gone down in or around our area, we had to have special evacuation plans for that. So when you look at your safety plans, be very tuned into what is happening in your local area and what are some of the other requirements that may be specific to your particular school that may not apply to other schools. But with that said, there's a very clear directive that's given underneath the Wisconsin Law 118.07 for health and safety requirements. And that is that since January 1st of 2019, and then every January 1st move forward thereafter, the schools and the governing bodies of each private school need to file a copy of their safety plan with the Office of School Safety. So it's mandatory, it has to be done. It may already be something that you're in your protocol and you're already working on. But the other key thing to remember is that when you do and perform all these various trainings, or you run through these different drills, make sure you're keeping an itemized list of when they're being done. And some other details that may be appropriate to keep track of is actually with your fire drills, how long from the time you start to when the time that the students exit the building, how long did it take you? That is something that sometimes is asked on some of the paperwork for the state. But keeping proper records is ideal. But really, there's 5 areas that you're going to have to track. The date of the annual drill or drills under that were held during the previous year. You're going to have a certification, that written evaluation of the drill or drills under Part CP, which reviewed by the school board and your governing body. So make sure that your board is aware that you're going to come to them with this documentation or have a set meeting in which you're going to have this addressed, especially if you have board meetings that are spread out throughout the year. Next, the date that most recent school training and school safety required and the number of attendees. The most recent date on which the school board or governing body reviewed and approved the school safety plan. And lastly, the most recent date on which the school board and the governing body consulted with local law enforcement agencies to conduct an on-site safety assessment required underneath the law. So this page right here provides a very good background for wanting to build out a requirement for the safety plans. Now, some of you may or may have not revisited and looked at your safety plans recently, but let it be that you have one, or you need to look at it, you need to revamp, or whatever the case may be. I highly recommend, as you'll see on the next slide, that you use a readiness and emergency management and school system from the Technical Assistance Center. This is something that you can find many of the links on DPI's website, but I find that this particular program helps guide and put you into the best position possible to create a emergency operation plan that is going to align with most tactical procedures of most fire departments and police departments in the state of Wisconsin. The U.S. Department of Education, Safe and Supportive Schools, has specifically designed this to make sure that there is a specific set of ways of doing things. And this is one of the best ways to have it highlighted. Many of the courses that are put together in this are very in-depth. The courses run for maybe about 30 to 60 minute tutorials. And they're broken up into very digestible chunks if you want to use this as a professional development opportunity. You can pick and choose which of these tutorials you would want to use. and assign it to your faculty and staff to follow through to get a better understanding of the proper way to engage with an emergency operation plan. The courses are readily accessible, very easy to view. And if you go to the next slide, I have the links that will be posted along with the website that you can go and see the flyers that detail what tutorials are offered, and then the list of the trainings that you can pick from. You put together a good array of trainings for new staff or seasoned staff at your schools so that they are aware of what these procedures should look like and what they should be thinking of. Now, ultimately, when you're looking at a EOP, you want to make sure you have a couple things that are in mind, right? And the first and foremost is understanding there's going to be various levels of threats and various levels of emergencies that are going to arise. And you need to have very specific plans in place to address each of those. And what you never want to find yourself being in the position of is making sure that you do not have an emergency response team on site ready to go, and that this all does not rest solely with one or even two people. You want to make sure that you have a substantiated team that can address and know how to address any situation that may come. Now, timing of this is crucial, right? Timing is everything when it comes to any type of emergency operation plan. You have a very short window to get communication out to families to let them know what has transpired. So making sure that you know who your comms team is and how they're going to address each and every one of these scenarios to the right channels is crucial. One of the questions we saw come through earlier were, are there any particular electronic or messaging boards that should be used? There's nothing in particular we can give you that tells you which one is best, but I would look into finding through your student information systems, is there an alert system that could be used with something you already have? Or you can look on the lines of purchasing alternative messaging systems for parents in the event that there was an emergency that took place at the school or that important information needed to get out. I ask you right now at this point in time, if each and every one of you, if your phones were to ring right now and there were to be an emergency at your school, how many of you right now would know that your staff would be fully equipped to respond to that emergency? I think many of you might have just paused in that moment, took a deep breath and thought, well, maybe they don't, or maybe they will. I know I found myself in this situation many a times, but it's never too late. This is why we're doing these types of trainings right now, so we can try to help you out to make sure that you can get these procedures into place as you enter into the school year. Many of you have had significant turnover, or some of you have small turnover. Some of you are bringing back your full staffs. But are they trained, and do they really know their role in every emergency? Would they be able to respond appropriately? Do they know what the protocols are? If you hesitate to answer that question, make sure you put it on your list of things to do here in the weeks to come to make sure that you put together some specific training time for them, or to have them look at these modules that are presented through the REAMS process to get them educated and up to speed on what you would want to do. The next important thing for you to do as you begin the school year is beginning this to continue these relationships with your local law enforcement and your fire department. It is absolutely crucial. They're going to be your number one ally. They're going to be your number one resource in the event that something happens at your schools. One thing I found very helpful was early in the year was be calling local law enforcement and do some walkthroughs just throughout the school so they can get a better understanding and a layout of where and how the school is designed, particularly with the officers that are going to be on call during the process of a school day. And then eventually, with a different shift, bring officers in at the nighttime too that are going to be assisting at maybe sporting events or plays or various performing arts events at your school. So they also can get a lay of the land, and they know where kids are going to be positioned, and they know where people are going to be flowing into the building in the event of an emergency so they can respond most accurately. The other key thing that I would suggest that you do is, if you do have video systems inside your school for supervision purposes, for safety purposes, work with your local law enforcement and fire departments so they have access to those video components, because in the event that there is an emergency, they can track an active shooter, they can track where children may have been lost, and they can track and find where kids are in the event something goes awry. And the relationship that you build there is vital to any type of emergency response. Now, putting that into context, understand that the essential planning components of your emergency plan is very important. You got to think about what's going to happen before in terms of training, what happens during the event, and how do you, after the event has taken place, how are you going to address everything? You have to understand that parents, family members, community members, there's going to be emotionally driven crowds that may show up. It could be the simplest thing as an incorrect email going out about a outbreak of some type of various bacteria, right? Or it could be the fact that there was a fire, that was a small fire alarm that went off. It's under control, but parents hear and get a text message from a kid, or they get a text message from someone very quickly that says, there's a fire at the school. Parents can start showing up at your door. Earlier, when I said timing is everything, it's in these types of situations, you want to make sure you have your communication plans in line to make sure that you can address very quickly with the parents that it was a small fire, there's no threat to students, no reason to come to the school. And you also want to make sure you calm parents down so they're not flooding the 911 dispatchers with, hey, there's a fire at X school, and create problems that way. So communications, again, is very crucial, making sure that you're going to be able to deal with any type of emotional situation that may arise. When parents start to come and they start to swarm in and have a lot of questions, you want to make sure that you're going to be able to have all the answers. You want to make sure that you have a communications point person ready to go in the event anything like this may happen. Your messaging system, your electronic texts, they're great, but make sure that people are trained on how to use them, making sure that there is a limited people that have access to them, and making sure that they're up to date and the messaging system is not going to be faulty and send out false messages. The next thing you want to go into is looking at your emergency preparedness activities. Again, your annual trainings with your staff. Anything that you're doing in terms of professional development early in the summer, or if you know you have breaks coming up, it's not a bad idea to work with your local law enforcement to run through some various drills and offer for your faculty and staff to be able to come through and work through some of these drills if possible. Now, given that you have your faculty and staff fully trained and you're going and you're working through this, as you train them, a very important component to this is understanding the memorandum of understanding that you should probably have with your local schools and surrounding areas around your school. In the event that there was a fire, in the event that there was some type of evacuation that took place, how do you mobilize and move a school of 50 to 100 to 200 to 300 kids to a safe location in which that they can be accounted for and they can be returned to their parents successfully? This is probably one of the worst nightmares of any school leader if it ever had to happen. But making sure that you have an agreement with locations in and around your school where students know where to go, parents know where to go, and you can also then deploy your staff or anybody that is there to help manage and keep control of that situation. I highly recommend that you look at the resources that they provide on the REAM system about looking at developing a memorandum and making sure that you go through the terms and conditions, you outline these partnerships and responsibilities, and you help with your staff. This will also help with your staff when there is turnover for various roles and responsibilities and protocols to make sure that they know what to do in the event of that type of situation. The most in-depth information that you will be able to find is going to be going through these trainings, finding these tutorials and working through them with your staff, and then aligning them with what is most effective for your school. If you have questions, don't feel be embarrassed or afraid to reach out to us for any points or any pointers or how we could best help serve you. With that, I'm going to turn it back over to Cory to talk about some issues that we've had recently that you may have seen come out from our communications, and we can have a Q&A after that.
Thank you. Yes, we have lots of good questions. I'm making notes. I know Carol's responding to a few questions specifically in the chat. But before we get to that, I wanted to touch on this that is probably on a lot of your minds. Over the weekend, we saw an announcement by the Minocqua Brewing Company Super PAC that they're launching this effort to challenge and end the school choice system. This is just a screenshot from their website. This is not necessarily a surprise. I mean, there's always been opponents to school choice. It's not a secret that this individual in particular is an opponent to school choice. This email was a fundraising email, so there's no indication that anything is imminent here. No lawsuit has been filed. They're trying to raise funds to challenge the program. And what we really want all of you to know is that we at the Wisconsin Institute for Law and Liberty are engaged. We're following this. We're working with School Choice Wisconsin and our allies. And we also want you to know that the choice program has withstood various legal challenges. It's been in place, as you know, here in Wisconsin since 1990. And we have a lot of favorable case law that is on our side. And even most recently at the United States Supreme Court level, there's really favorable case law related to religious schools in particular, kind of saying if the state decides that they want to have a school choice program, not only is it permissible for them to include private religious schools, but if they're going to have a statewide choice program, they have to. They can't exclude schools just because they're religious. And to that point, we're confident in the constitutionality of the program. We don't have any details yet of what exactly those legal claims will be, but we think they're most likely to relate to how the program is funded and be premised on our state constitution. So again, we're working on that. I mean, the email kind of gave us a roadmap of what we want, in addition to getting ready to respond to any challenge, things that we might want to focus on. So we're working on legal responses, exploring potential claims. Again, no lawsuit filed, and once it is, this will take time. In addition to a legal response, I know Will is, and other organizations also will be looking at policy responses. What can we put out there to educate the public that this program is wanted, it's popular, and it's serving students and families well? And then just in addition to that, public messaging. So kind of on all three of those prongs, legal, policy, and messaging, I just wanted to plant a seed for you all that, you know, if and when this lawsuit is filed and we get ready to defend it, we would like to intervene to defend the program. And to do that, we will need clients. And potentially that could be schools, parents, School Choice Wisconsin. So just, you know, nothing imminent, but just something to think about. If you want to get involved, we will eventually need clients. And in addition to that, we'll need stories. I think some storytelling about how this program has really served families really well will be really compelling in addition. And again, without having the details of what legal claims are going to be made, and with the caveat that you never know what 4 justices on the United States Supreme Court will do, if they'll find some way. We think it's pretty unlikely that they invalidate the entire program. And we don't want anyone to be, you know, imminently fearful. We're really confident in our legal arguments. We're following this closely. So we just wanted to flag that for you all. And if anyone has more specific questions or wants to talk, we're always willing to do that as well. And with that, I think we'll take it back to the Q&A. One thing I wanted to flag, if others aren't looking at the chat, there was a question about whether fire drills, specifically fire drills, have to be monthly. And Carol went ahead and looked at that statute. Fire drills should be once every month, but safety drills may be substituted for any other drill required under that section. So in terms of the question that it doesn't necessarily have to be every month, I think that would be right based on that section of the statutes. Another question And I suppose we don't need that anymore. But another question that we got with the signups related to what's the consequences if I don't follow all of these perfectly? And I think that depends, and it depends on what local, agency, what state agency is going to try to enforce some of these things. If they come in and ask for compliance, this is an area that we're going to look into as well in terms of like exactly what would the consequences be. If you're participating in the school choice program, there's a provision at the end of the school choice statutes for when the superintendent can end participation in the program. And looking at that initially, I think it would be overreach. I think it would be inappropriate if the superintendent, if DPI were to say, you can't be in the program anymore because you didn't perfectly comply with the health and safety requirements, because there are other things listed there related to accreditation, fraud, some financial things that are explicitly listed. So I think, worst case scenario, I don't see that as an issue. But again, that's something that we're going to look into, because I know some of you were curious about what would the consequences be if we don't follow all of these perfectly. And again, there's a lot, local, state, federal level. This is just a roadmap that we're providing you. So we certainly understand that there's a lot of details there.
I see the question from James asking if they start school on August 29th, does he need to have an August drill? The way that it looks like the statute is written is that the months in which that their school is not in session, there's not children in session, you do not need to have a drill during that time. So having one for sometime in the month of September would be adequate for you to be able to do your first drill.
I'm noticing the question here also in terms of the school that has 7th to 10th graders. Do we need to offer the CPR and the AED instruction? And the answer to that is yes. So in the actual statutory language, it's in any health courses that you offer. So if you're offering any kind of health course, sometime during that period, you need to offer training. And again, you don't need to make the students certified in these things. You need to offer the training, and the training needs to be, a nationally recognized training, like the American Red Cross, for instance, the American Heart Association. Those trainings are acceptable for that.
I was going to add that as well, that it's explicitly in the statute that the training can be American Red Cross, American Heart Association, or a nationally recognized evidence-based guidelines for CPR and AED. So those are kind of in terms of what the training needs to be. That's all there is in state law.
There's another question here back on the fire drills. Would a summer school count? Would summer school count for the need of a fire drill?
Oh, that's a good question. I don't believe so, but that would be one that I'd want to look into specifically for you all, because the language, as we had talked about, is when there's students, when the school is in session. So I would want to confirm that.
The next question that came in following up on the
just one before we jump into that one too. I do have the response to that. According to the DPI, it says fire drills must be conducted at least once each month that the school is occupied with pupils. If all classes are virtual and there are no in-person classes, then drills do not have to be performed. This is similar to what occurs during the summer when classes are usually not being conducted.
Thank you.
Okay, and on the next question, whether or not the staff need training for the CPR and the AED, the specific statute that we referenced there does not require that. It's specific to pupils in grades 7 to 12.
And I know here we responded to this in the chat, but in case anyone didn't see it, there was a question as to whether the physical restraint training is for all schools in all parental choice programs or only the special needs scholarship program. And that one is only for the special needs scholarship program. And the other thing I wanted as individuals, we'll stay on here if there are other questions that folks think of. But if you think of it later, I just wanted to flag that, you can always reach out to School Choice Wisconsin, reach out to Will. If you have a school specific question, feel free to reach out directly. I should share here my email.